and I'm not going to ruin the story for you. I'll ask Nick to tell it. But Nick, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm outstanding, Dan. Thank you for having me. I thought you were going to give away all my secrets.
I'm aware of a few of your secrets, but I bet you have some that you've withheld from me. I want to start off. I'm just going to kick right into it. 2003, you were snowboarding. What happened?
Sure. So I was at ski club with my friends and going to the mountain. We had all brought our snowboard gear on the bus to get ready so we wouldn't miss any time once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain, and when the rest of the class migrated inside the lodge to get ready, we were ready to go. So we headed right for the chairlift. On the ride up, we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining. So people were wiping out everywhere. The chairlift also went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And it went right over the biggest jump in the terrain park. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's what I'm hitting. That's it. That has my name all over it. So I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. Going out to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, which threw me off balance. That's the last thing that I remember. I was told that I landed on my head. I wasn't wearing a helmet. Something else that I learned after the fact, this is all kind of came back to me piecemeal based on people that were observing it and people that were there that day. So I didn't have a helmet on. The only protection that my head had was a pair of goggles. And the goggles that I wore had a lot of padding on them. So in essence, they saved my life. I learned that with each subsequent hit after the initial impact, which they braced, that my goggles mysteriously moved to cushion each blow as I continued to hit my head and continued to roll down the mountain. Second thing that happened that day, which is pretty amazing, the hospital wanted to, the paramedics rather, wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain because of the severity of my injuries. They couldn't because it was too windy. So they had to send in an ambulance. And out of all the paramedics in the area, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. Now, there are still several things that I can't remember because of the accident. And now I know it's one of the reasons that I'm here with you today. So once I got to the hospital, this is all things I learned after the fact. The third thing that happened that was very instrumental in my recovery and instrumental to why I'm able to stand up. I am standing, I'm not sitting, sharing this story with you. I was in the ICU, in the intensive care unit at the hospital, unable to communicate with anyone. I was out for the count. The doctors would, no fault of their own, it's just what they do. They would come into my room to share progress updates with my parents. And as you can imagine, at the onset, it wasn't very positive. If anything, it was more negative and more negative and more negative progressively. So
They're
my
sharing
parents,
this to they're sharing this to your parents when you're in the room.
they were going to.
Okay.
They started to share with my parents what the prognosis was with me. My parents stopped them. They said, "No, no, not in front of him." So
You were in coma. You were in a coma at this point,
yeah,
right?
exactly. They understood that even though I was out for the count, not able to communicate with anyone, I was still taking in information because they understood the power of the mind. So
Yeah.
they made the doctors step outside the room. And once outside the room, Dan, that's where they shared with my parents that, look, he's in a coma from his injury. Based on the fact that just from the impact alone, he would have been out for 7 to 10 days at a minimum. We can't, however, risk that he'll wake up and start panicking and worry about what happened and who are you people and what am I doing here. So they induced me. So it was a partially induced coma. So they weren't even sure. They shared with my parents that, hey, we're not sure how long he's going to be out, if he is even going to come out of his coma. However, even if he does, he's probably not going to be prepared. He's probably not going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on his own. So my parents took this information. They thanked the doctors. Then, though, Dan, this allowed me to treat it like any other situation. I didn't know any of this. This was all like noise going on outside the room. I had no idea about any of this. So what this allowed me to do, once I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me, I was able to get up, do the best I could every day, and I kept getting better every day. And
How old were
now,
you then?
I'm sorry,
How old were you then?
I was 14.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, I was 14. So I remember this all comes back to me that I remember a month after my accident. So it was the beginning of March of 2003 when I really started to, because I wasn't transported to the rehab hospital until close to 4 weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks, not
You
quite a
were in
month.
coma. You were in a coma that whole time?
I was in a coma for 3 weeks,
Okay.
and that was partially induced. However, there are video of me uh, in the hospital in the ICU where I had my eyes open. I was looking around at everyone, and I have no memory of that. So it was like the lights were on, but no one was home.
I have that almost every day, but that's a whole different conversation.
So, like a month after my accident, I started to get my wits about me, and I overheard I couldn't talk. I had to learn everything all over again. So I heard my parents talking to the doctors and my therapist saying, all right, what are we going to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? And I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out of the hospital. So then running out of the hospital became our common goal, and where my whole company common goal, where the name comes from. So everything we were doing every day was to strive towards that common goal of running out of the hospital. Now, unknowingly, I utilized a system. That's where the STEP system came from, to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. Uh, STEP is an acronym. It stands for support. And I'll give you a 10,000-foot view right now.
Okay.
Support, make sure you have the support of your family and friends around you. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. Trust that the next step is always going to be available to you as long as you take your first step, follow it, and also trust that voice that you have inside of you. That voice that said to me, no, you're going to run out. Um, pardon the pun, but I ran with that. So I was like, all right, that's what we're going to do. So I shared that with everyone, and was able to run out of the hospital. E is energy. Energy, maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And if you don't have your energy, think about it, Dan. You can probably relate to this. If you don't have your energy, how can you expect to influence and support other people that are going through anything?
It's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
do for sure. Yeah.
And then finally, P is persistence. Persistence, once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to take your next step, move forward every day, no matter how small, you're building an unstoppable momentum. This is anything.
Yeah.
So literally it's anything. So for me, it was in the recovery. However, I've applied it to different areas of my life, and it works that whenever you're first faced with something and it seems insurmountable, by moving forward and doing something every day, doesn't matter how small it is. As long as you're doing something every day, you're building an unstoppable momentum that once you're getting going, you can have almost scheduled days off. However, those first 90 to 100 days that you're working at something new, you got to be generating that momentum that with persistence. So if you fast forward a little bit, during my recovery, I remember this. I was in a wheelchair and I was
How long after your accident were we talking about now?
so first when I first came this is interesting. When I first came out of the coma and I was first at the rehab hospital, I was transported to the third floor, which
Okay.
was for the most severe cases. I hardly have any memory of being on the third floor. However, I remember I'm able to piecemeal together by memories here and there that probably I would say 30 to 45 days after I'm talking about after my accident. So I was able to the thing that I was able to do first was sit up in bed for 8 minutes at a time. And just sitting up in bed for 8 minutes at a time, I was sweating thoroughly like I had just run a marathon. I had just
So
competed
that
in
took
an
everything out
Ironman.
of you. That,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Okay.
then I graduated to a fully supported wheelchair and then a regular wheelchair. I can remember though, one day in a regular wheelchair in my room, and I had long days at the hospital. So I would wake up, I would need help from my occupational therapist teaching me how to shower again. I mean, picture that. I had to learn literally everything all over. So writing, showering, I had to learn everything, swallowing,
Mhm.
everything all over again. So I remember in my room at lunch, looking over my situation, I just couldn't figure it out. I remember turning to my mom and asking, am I ever going to be able to walk again?
Mm.
And she didn't hesitate. She said, of course you are. That's what we're doing here. So you can get everything back and we can go home. So I point to this, Dan, because we all have moments of doubt. So people hear my story of the snowboarding accident and running out of the hospital, and they think, "Oh, great, yeah, good for you. It must have been easy for you." No, I had doubt. Like I share this story because I had doubt. I'm human, just like every one of us has doubts, and I think that's important to mention. And
How did
then,
you go
go
ahead?
ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, how did you apply this? I mean, this is a tremendous lesson that you learn about life at a very young age. And, you know, when we get these setbacks, and not everyone has a setback as significant as what you're describing. In fact, most don't. Yet we all have setbacks. And so you're describing something that's an extreme, and God bless you. And I'm grateful that, you got through that. I want to learn more about that here in a few moments. But how did you take those lessons and then apply those to your life professionally, personally, spiritually, energetically? Tell us more about that if you could, please.
Sure, and I think it's going to come out naturally, but I that's how the step system and what I'm sharing with you is how I was brought up to. That's just how you deal with things. Like you get up and do the best you can every day until you make it, until you finish. Not um, so I think that's just something that I've naturally done and was kind of drilled into me as a kid, as a child, that's kind of how you deal with things. And it took me going through not only this, there's I actually, if we have time, I don't know if we're gonna have enough time, but I actually I had a voice challenge in 2012 that I developed. They couldn't say for sure what it was from. However, I know it was I know it was because of my accident, like certain
Something with your
factors.
vocal cords or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Where it almost sounded like it was hard to get the words out. Like, and I was just talking normal. So I had to have a combination of Botox injections in my throat along with voice therapy from highly trained voice specialists to get my voice back. And I think I'm more proud of that just because that took 8 or 9 years from start to finish to be able to say, all right, I'm
That's
done.
that persistence. Yeah, I mean, that's the persistence that you talked about. I mean, 8 or 9 years is a significant period of time to devote to something, to, whether if it's physical like that or mental or intellectual or, professionally.
Well, Dan, you're touching on something of why I might have recency bias, but I'm more proud of that than I am from overcoming my traumatic brain injury, um, because it was really a true test of persistence. There were some dark moments there, uh, but I just kept going. So, and we'll get to that. We'll dive into that if we have time here. I'm not sure.
I
Yeah,
want to tie this into business here in a second, okay? But before I do so, you said something about momentum. And I want to make sure, because I didn't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure that the viewers and listeners got what you said about momentum. And the way that I describe momentum is if you can envision like this steel ball on the bottom of a metal chain, and your job, it's thousands of pounds, is to take that steel ball and to get it to go round and round into circles. And you go up to that steel ball and you dig your feet in and you get against it and you push with all your might and you get nothing. And then you push a little bit more and you get nothing. And then you get an inch and then maybe 2 inches. And then at some point you get momentum. But what I think so few people understand is how long you have to continue to push before you can step back and then just sort of, give it small pushes so that it maintains the momentum. Because if you push and you push and you push, and let's say that ball is swinging back and forth at, 45 degrees to the right, 45 degrees to the left, or whatever the case may be. I guess it would be 90 and 90. And it's pushing, you're pushing at that. And if you stop, it's not going to keep the momentum. So what you said was, yeah, you got to do this for at least 90 days before you can take a day off if you've got an intention. And so do I understand what you're talking about with momentum correctly, that you've got to almost do it daily before you could sort of let yourself off, but you still have to keep pushing it? Does that resonate with you?
absolutely. I can go in so many different directions of what you're saying. I agree wholeheartedly with you. And the reason I'll bring this back to my work with Common Goal and my speaking now, I'm able to speak to associations like brain injury associations, for instance, and other organizations like Dysphonia International, and deliver my keynote, and which is also I get to go a little bit more in depth on what we're doing. Um, but doing that, I didn't. So when I endeavored to do, all right, I want to take motivational speaking seriously and go down this avenue. Someone saw me speak at one of our real estate events, our QLS Live in 2019, and she approached me, gave me her card, and said, "I'm not trying to steal you from your dad. However, if you ever want to bring your story to a new level, so you're able to impact the maximum amount of people, let me know and I can introduce you to a few people." So I held on to her card. I was still going through my voice issue, my dysphonia, that's what you call it. And I held on to it until May of 2021. And had a call with her. She introduced me to her mentor, Trisha Brooke, who's become my mentor. And I've just been saying yes to her since we spoke in May of 2021. First for her speaker salon, where I had the opportunity to be on stage for 6 weeks in a row at the Triad Theater in New York City. And then during it, she pitched to me the idea of working one-on-one with her. And that's what I really credit. That's where the step system came from. And that's where Common Goal came from. And that's where my keynote came from, that I'm able to impact and affect people's lives that are going through trauma right now and help them get through to the other side and thrive with the rest of their life. that did, when I was first starting that, I was like, a mad person. That was in, I was working with her intensely one-on-one every 2 or 3 weeks. We'd have an hour call. So we had an hour call, and literally during that time, for the first 90 days, I was working every day. I did something every day. Because I did something every day, I was able to generate that momentum. And that's why I was able to last year speak at Dysphonia International Symposium, last year speak at the Brain Injury Association Maryland Symposium, in March, speak to 350 people, deliver my keynote. All of that wouldn't have existed if I didn't set that momentum and do something, a little something every day, to really ensure my success.
I'm curious, and I genuinely, I'm not going to predict what your answer is going to be on this. My experience in achieving goals, and I don't know, I've got some guesses on why this may be my experience, but my experience has been that any goal that I want to achieve takes far greater work, effort, time, money, and resources to be able to achieve than what I could ever imagine. And now I know that there's people in this world that don't have that experience, but I think there's probably more that do have that experience. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree.
Okay.
I do agree with that. And this is interesting. I don't get the opportunity to share this, but often, but I will with you today, that after I graduated high school in 2007. And just because of my story, and having run out of the hospital in 2003, a few years before that, I was like, yeah, all right. Everyone told me I should be doing speaking. And
Okay.
everyone told me I should be doing that. And then so I started to go to Toastmasters, and I just started to get my feet wet with that. I worked with someone that my dad knew growing up, and he was paying for the coaching. So it really wasn't something that I I was committed to and I was ready for. Um, so I figured I would go back to it at some point. I just figured I'd have to get some real life experience. So I've been involved in real estate, and my family has been involved in real estate all my life. So the natural next step for me was to get my real estate license. So I got my real estate license in March of '08, and then I was a successful realtor for 8 years. And um, all throughout that, no matter what I've been doing, Dan, I've always had, and I'll tie this back to real estate and what we're talking about. But I've always had this voice in the back of my head, no matter how successful I am, how much success I'm having, that I have to be sharing my story from stage and helping individuals that are going through trauma or a life challenge get through to the other side and to be able to thrive with the rest of their lives. It's always been there, and I haven't been able to get rid of it, no matter what I do or what I achieve. Then after that person who saw me speak, Sharon Spano, in 2019, gave me her card. From the moment I called her in May of 2021 to now, almost 3 years later, there has been no voice. And to me, that's evidence that I'm doing exactly what I've been put on this earth to do. And to do my initial call with her, Trisha, that is, she said to me, I shared my goals with her of what I wanted to accomplish eventually, and she said that that's definitely attainable. I'll help you get here. And I said, what do you recommend? And she said, my speaker salon. And she said, that's 25,000. I said, yeah, okay, yes, I'll do that. And then working with her, uh, going on stage at the Triad Theater for 6 weeks in a row in New York City, she said to me that halfway through, she said, well, all right, I see us working one-on-one together, And I specialize in working with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform and kind of bring them to a new level. And she said, that's 75,000. I said, yes. I don't know where I'm going to get the money, but yes, give me a week and I'll figure it out. And a week later, I got financing and figured it out. And if I didn't do that, and if I didn't continue to say yes, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Well, that's taking a risk on yourself and believing in, the resources and the coaching that you had available to you, and understanding that it was an investment, that you would make, and with the expectation that you're going to have a return, and that's like any other investment, whether it's $1, $2, or 75,000. It's you're not going to invest that money into something if you don't have faith that you're going to get multiples in return. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate. And to answer your
But it's not
question,
just about money, by the way, but
yeah,
it's also about impact as well. But money's a part of it.
money's the whole yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think initially back to your question of is it going to take you more time and more money and more resources than you originally think? Yes. I could have just answered you and not done that whole story, but we wouldn't have been
Sure.
able to go through that whole story. So I think when I first got out of school, first got out of high school, and I was kind of dipping my toe in the water of this motivational speaking thing, I was trying to get I was trying to get to my goal of being on stage, being a motivational speaker, getting paid to speak without going through the investment of time, resources, and energy of what I've done for the past 2.5, almost 3 years.
How do you tie all this in with? I know that your family's, big into real estate investing, and I know that you guys have helped out many, many, many people to, create a financing and commercial investment, and how does this all tie back together into real estate?
Good question. And I'm glad we got there. I'm glad we got back on track. All right, so interesting. I wasn't After running out of the hospital, I still had to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long. And it's a little surreal to me looking back on it. And Trisha, my mentor, actually reflected back to me that she goes, wait a minute. So only 18 months after finishing rehab from your snowboarding accident and being in a coma, you were knocking on pre-foreclosure doors in some not so nice areas of
Time
cities.
out, time out, time out. If you're a real estate agent, if you're a real estate investor, if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur, and you are not taking action because you're afraid, listen to what this man is saying right now. 18 months after, and he's out knocking on doors. So sorry to interrupt you, but I want to put a big freaking spotlight on what you're saying right now. Go ahead. Excuse me.
Thank you. So I was after, and it was less than that, probably a year after finishing my rehab, I started getting the itch, and I started just reading and looking at different things. I was always around it, but I just picked up a book off my dad's library, which was The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kawasaki. And that really started my wheels turning. And so I came to my dad and I said, how do I help? And how do I start getting, he was an investor at the time. How do I help and start getting involved in real estate and like helping with the company and everything? And right around that time, I was starting to get my license, my driver's license. And they were playing with the idea of having bird dogs go out to properties and knock on the doors of homeowners that have received the notice of default letter from the bank. And I was like, this is perfect. I can't drive with anyone in my car, but I can go and knock on doors because I'm just getting my license. So that's what I would do. I had to go to school during the week. However, on the weekends, I would do 50 to 70 doors in a day. And at the beginning, I got a lot of doors slammed in my face because they just gave me a script, a leave behind, and the place to go to find where these notice of default homeowners were. So, and they said, knock yourself out. I basically just ran up to the door and spit out the script and got a lot of doors slammed in my face. So I had no
Oh,
technique. Yeah, exactly. No technique. And shortly after starting, my cousin Mike and I, my dad flew us out to California to shadow the #1 person in the country that was having success with these pre-foreclosure doors, notice to default doors. And once I saw his technique and how much success he was having and how nuanced everything was, I really incorporated that into my own teachings. Like,
do you remember what you incorporated? Do you remember any specifics?
absolutely. I
What were they?
absolutely. So instead of just rushing up to the door and knocking, being right there when they answered, he would not, and then by default, I would walk up, do a light knock, like just a friend knock, walking, coming by, wanted to say hi, what's up, what's going on. Just a light knock, like a friend walking by, then take a few steps down off the step. Then when they came to the door, say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know if I have the right address, and look at the other two houses around you and say,
Step back up, Nick. Step back up to your microphone because you're
oh, I'm
yeah, there you go.
sorry. So I'll
That's
take it
okay.
with me. I'll take it with me. So
If you're listening to this on the audio, if you're listening to this on the podcast, he took a step back and then that's when the audio got a little bit low. But go ahead.
yeah, so I would knock on the door and take like a friend coming by, and then I would take a few steps back, and then when they'd answer, I would show them my clipboard and their name and information on there, and just look at either side of the door and say, hey, I'm looking for this person at this address. I'm not sure I have the right place. Could you help me out? And once they saw their name on the list, they would light up. They would open up and share with him, and by default me. Then it became me,
Yeah, that's brilliant.
what was going on, what they were doing to fix this situation. Or really, let's be serious, this was 2006. What they weren't doing to fix the situation, those
Yeah.
rotten banks. Um, so I saw that, and we actually had several houses. I don't want to name cities just because yeah, just I don't want to alienate people, but I would, let's just say I went to some not so nice areas of cities where they were right next to each other, and I could hit the most amount of doors in a day. So I would
But
do,
like they were basically to describe it generically, a lot of row houses that you can get from one to the next to the next.
yeah, the city. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I continue to do that throughout the rest of my high school career. And this was really my first, and to this day, I think it's the best sales training. If you can go up to someone who's clearly in a distressed situation and get them to take the next step, which would be meeting with the investor, scheduling a meeting for the following week with the investor. Um, I think that's the best, that's some of the best sales training in the world.
Because
To be able to
you
do
have to
that.
use empathy to connect with them in their situation, but
Yeah.
simultaneously also some firmness of how allowing for them to understand that they need help and that for them to avoid having a conversation with you or finding a different solution isn't going to be in their benefit, right? So it's a little bit of a yin and a yang when they're already sort of at this place where and again I'm describing it, this may or may not be accurate, but they may be in a place where they're a victim or they're experiencing like, hey, not my fault, the bank screwed me over, that type of thing. I know I've met a lot of people at that time, and that was the experience that I had. So that, yeah, it takes a great deal of sales skill for sure.
And there's no better training, I think. And then after getting out of high school, I started studying to get my real estate license, and then I was a realtor, as I mentioned, from 2008, full time 2008 to 2014. And then at the end of my realtor career, I was a realtor until January of 2016. I started helping my dad, who was getting all these properties under contract, and he needed help with marketing them. And he came to me, he said, hey, would you be able to help me market these? You could do it right alongside being a realtor, and just post us on a couple different websites. And I was like, no. I got my own thing going on here. I'm good. I don't need your help. Um, luckily he asked me a few times, so I finally said yes. And then over the course of a year, it
Hey,
really
Nick, just so you know, next time your dad's looking for a great listing agent and you're too humble, send him my way. I'll take that on.
so he
I don't need your help, Dad. I'll take it. Go on. Sorry.
so he yeah, so that morphed into just doing the marketing, morphed into working with all the buyers that were calling off the marketing. And over the course of a year, my income shifted from being 80% as from being a realtor sales to being and 20% with him. My income shifted. It just didn't make sense for me to keep my real estate license. So I joined him full time in 2016. And then I developed the process that we're able to put our rental home buyers through to make sure that they're successful. They get to the end of their rental own agreement, they're successful, and they're able to go forward and get their own loan. So, real quick, the um, nationally or just historically in the industry, there's probably only 10 or 20% of the rental home buyers who do go forward and get their financing. However, our we're seeing the inverse of that. We see up to 90%. So 80 to 90% of our rental home buyers do go forward and get financing on the home. And that's because of the very specific and very particular buyer process that we put them through. So we do heavy pre-qualifying and vetting up front. Our standards are even stricter than banks are, even to this day, for what they require for income, and also down payment. So we want to make sure
All
there's
right.
a down payment.
So just to provide some clarity on this, one of the strategies that you're employing, you're using a lot of creative financing to acquire properties, and then you're leasing them on a rent to own option. And what you're talking about is the purchase rate of the tenant slash option holder of being close to 90%. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, and there are so many nuances even to what you just said.
Sure, of course.
So you said you're doing what we're doing is selling it on um an option, a purchase option. We don't want to use the term option, even though that's the legal instrument
Yeah.
that we're doing to acquire the property and then sell like that. That's one of the tools that we do. However, we don't ever want to use the term option with our rent home buyers, because then it leads them to believe, all right, well, I'm going to rent this home and then I have the option to purchase it at the end.
You're using
Whereas
rent to own. You're saying rent to own instead. So yeah,
rent to own, lease purchase. We
okay,
want them to know this is a definitive purchase.
got it.
We're treating them like buyers. They're taking care of all maintenance, repair, and upkeep. Like they're not calling us if the toilet's leaking, for instance, and they're capturing equity just like a homeowner, but they're taking all responsibility for maintenance, repair, and upkeep.
All right, Nick. So we're gonna be running out of time here, but I know there's so much that you have of wisdom to share more about with the investing. I know you've got a book that you could share with people. Tell us about the book first, and then tell us about your website of how people can get in touch with you to learn more.
Sure. If your listeners have a free giveaway, free gift for your listeners. So if they go to wickedsmartbooks.com/N as in Nancy, B as in boy, M as in Mary, three, the number three, they'll be able to get the new rules of real estate investing. Excuse me. And I'm a co-author on that along with my dad and my brother-in-law, Zach. That's 24 leading experts. Look, we're not going to we're biased. It doesn't mean we're wrong, but we think our niche in buying and selling the way we do creatively is the best. However, this book goes into detail from other niches in the real estate industry because there are tons of them, and you'll be able to learn about those. So wickedsmartbooks.com/NBM3. Then if the way that we buy and sell homes piqued your interest at all, you can go to smartrealestatecoach.com. And if you scroll down, you can get registered for the free master's class. That's going to teach you all about how we buy and sell on terms. I know we didn't really have a ton of time
Yeah.
to dive into that today. It's also going to teach you about our trademark 3 payday system.
Love it.
Lastly, if anything that I had to say regarding my story and the step system interest any of your listeners, they can download the step system for free at nickprefontaine.com/step. And that's going to teach them all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. We only had like a 10,000 foot view today, but that goes into detail. And if they go there, nickprefontaine.com/step, that'll help them take their first step today.
Nick, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, and God bless you. And I wish you much continued success. I wish your family much continued success. Real estate agents, brokers, entrepreneurs, I wish for you to have the best day of your life. Be grateful, make good choices, go help somebody, and go find some listings.